The Wind in the Willows. Please like, share, and subscribe. Chapter 9. The Further Adventures of Toad. Toad woke up cold and stiff, and for a moment he wasn't sure where he was. Then he remembered. He was free. He crawled out of the hollow tree where he'd spent the night and headed down the road, hoping to find someone who could give him directions home. After a while, he realized there was a canal running next to the road, a man-made stream used for transportation. Soon he saw a horse plodding along the towpath, pulling a rope attached to a barge that floated on the canal. Steering the barge was a stout woman wearing a sunbonnet. "A nice morning, ma'am," she said to Toad. "It is, ma'am," responded Toad politely as he walked along the towpath next to her. "At least it's a nice morning for people who aren't in trouble, like I am. I'm off to see my married daughter who sent for me. I don't know what's wrong, but I fear the worst. Meanwhile, I had to leave my washing work behind and my children, and now I've lost all my money and I don't know where I am." "Where does your married daughter live, ma'am?" asked the barge woman. "She lives near the river, ma'am," replied Toad, "close to a fine house called Toad Hall." "Toad Hall? Why, I'm going that way myself," replied the barge woman. "You come along in the barge with me, and I'll give you a lift." She steered the barge close to the bank, and Toad jumped in. "Toad's luck again," he thought. "I always come out on top." "So you're in the washing business, ma'am?" asked the barge woman politely as they glided along. "That's right," said Toad. "And do you enjoy washing?" asked the barge woman. "I love it," said Toad. "I'm never so happy as when I have both arms in the wash tub." "What good luck meeting you," said the barge woman. "What do you mean?" asked Toad nervously. "Well," replied the barge woman, "I like washing too, but I have trouble keeping up with it, especially when my husband goes off hunting the way he did today and leaves me to take care of the boat." "Oh, well," said Toad, "the washing will keep. Forget it, and maybe your husband will catch something good for dinner." "I just can't forget it," said the barge woman, "but you'll be happy to know that there's a heap of dirty clothes in the corner of the cabin. You can have your fun washing them, and it'll be a real help to me. There's a tub and soap and a bucket to haul up water from the canal. Then I'll know you're enjoying yourself instead of just sitting here bored." "Why don't you let me steer?" said Toad. "Then you can do the washing your own way." "Let you steer?" replied the barge woman, laughing. "It takes some practice to steer a barge right. Besides, it's boring work, and I want you to be happy. No, you do the washing, and I'll stick to steering." Toad was cornered. He thought about trying to jump off the barge, but it was too far from the bank. "Oh, well," he thought, "I suppose any fool can wash." He got to the tub and the soap and the dirty clothes and started in. But Toad could not figure out how to get the clothes clean. He splished and splashed and kept losing the soap in the sudsy water. His back was aching and his paws were getting all crinkly. Finally, the barge woman began to laugh. She laughed so hard she could hardly talk. "I've been watching you all the time," she gasped. "Some washerwoman you are." Toad lost his temper. You barge woman," he shouted. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. Washerwoman indeed. I am a toad, a very well-known, respected, distinguished toad, and I will not be laughed at by a barge woman." The woman moved nearer to him and looked under his bonnet. "Well, so you are," she cried. "Well, I never. A nasty, crawly toad on my nice, clean barge. Now, that is a thing that I will not have." She grabbed Toad by one front leg and one back leg and threw him off the barge. He landed in the cold water with a splash and swam for shore, which wasn't easy with his washerwoman's dress tangled around his legs. The barge woman was still laughing as he climbed up the bank, and Toad felt angrier than ever. He ran after the barge, which had moved down the canal until he caught up with the horse that was towing it. He unfastened the rope, jumped on the horse, and galloped off. "Stop! Stop!" cried the barge woman as her barge ran into the bank and stopped moving. "I've heard that song before," said Toad, laughing as he rode away. The horse was old and tired, and it could not gallop for long. Soon it was walking slowly along, but Toad didn't care. He wasn't angry anymore, just impressed with how smart he had been to get revenge in such a clever way. After a while, the horse stopped to eat, and Toad looked up to see an old gypsy wagon. There was a man sitting beside it, cooking a delicious-smelling stew in an iron pot over an open fire. When Toad smelled the food, he was suddenly hungrier than ever. The gypsy and Toad looked at each other. Then the gypsy spoke. "Want to sell that horse of yours?" Toad was surprised, but he saw right away that selling the horse might be a very good idea. "What?" he said. "Sell this beautiful young horse of mine? Oh, no, it's out of the question. Who's going to take the washing home to my customers every week? Besides, I love him, and he loves me. Anyway, he's a very fine horse, and you probably couldn't afford him." Toad paused. "How much were you going to offer?" The gypsy looked the horse over, and then he looked Toad over. "Nickel a leg," he said. "A nickel a leg!" cried Toad. "Now let me just add that up." He climbed off the horse, sat down by the gypsy, and counted on his fingers. At last he said, "A nickel a leg. That comes to exactly 4 nickels. Oh, no, I couldn't think of taking 4 nickels for this beautiful young horse of mine." "Well," said the gypsy, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make it 5 nickels, but that's my last word." Toad sat and thought. He was hungry and had no money, and he was still far from home. In some ways, 5 nickels seemed like a lot. On the other hand, it did not seem like much to get for a horse. But then again, the horse hadn't cost him anything, so whatever he got was a profit. At last he said firmly, "Look here, gypsy, I'll tell you what we'll do. And this is my last word. You give me 5 nickels and as much breakfast as I can eat, and I'll give you my horse." The gypsy grumbled, but finally agreed. He gave Toad the money, then he filled up a plate with delicious stew, and Toad ate and ate until he couldn't eat any more. By the time Toad said goodbye to the gypsy and the horse, he felt much better. His stomach was full, his clothes were dry, and he had money in his pocket. As he walked along, he thought of his adventures and escapes, and how when things seemed at their worst, he had always managed to find a way out. He began to swell with pride. "Ho, ho," he said to himself as he marched along with his chin in the air. "What a clever Toad I am. My enemies shut me up in prison. I walk out. They chase me with engines and policemen. I escape. I'm thrown into a canal by a nasty fat woman. So what? I swim ashore, I steal her horse, and I sell it for a whole pocket full of money and an excellent breakfast. Ho, ho! I am Toad, the handsome, the popular, the successful Toad." He got so puffed up that he made up a song all about himself and sang it loudly as he walked. But Toad's pride was about to have a great fall. As he walked along the highway, he heard something familiar. Beep, beep! A motor car. Toad was excited. "I'll flag them down," he thought, "and they'll give me a ride. With luck, maybe I'll end up driving up to Toad Hall in a motor car. That will show Badger." He stepped right out into the road to stop the motor car. But when it slowed down, he suddenly became very pale. His knees started shaking, and he fell over onto the road in a heap. The car was the very one he had stolen from the restaurant. "Oh, what a stupid Toad I've been. Now I'll end up back in jail," he moaned. The motor car came closer and stopped. 2 men got out and looked at Toad, and one of them said, "Oh dear, this is very sad. Here is a poor old washerwoman who has fainted in the road. Let's lift her into the car and take her to the village." Carefully, they lifted Toad into the motor car and propped him up with a soft cushion. Then they headed off again. Toad's courage came back as soon as he knew that his disguise had fooled him. He opened his eyes. "Look," said one of the men, "she's better already. The fresh air is doing her good. How do you feel now, ma'am?" "Thank you kindly, sir," said Toad in a feeble voice. "I'm feeling much better." "Good," said the man. "Now keep still and don't try to talk." "I won't," said Toad. "I was just thinking that if I could sit in the front seat beside the driver, I could get more fresh air in my face, and I would feel even better." "What a smart woman," said the man. "Of course you shall." So they helped Toad into the front seat. Toad was almost himself again by now. He sat up, looked around, and tried to resist the old temptation he was feeling. But then, of course, he gave in. He turned to the driver. "Please, sir," he said, "I wish you would let me try to drive the car for a little. I've been watching you carefully, and it looks so easy and so interesting. I would like to be able to tell my friends that I once drove a motor car." The driver laughed. "Ha ha, bravo, ma'am. I like your spirit. Have a try." Toad scrambled into the driver's seat, took the steering wheel in hands, pretended to listen to the instructions the man gave, and started driving. He went very slowly and carefully at first. The men applauded, and Toad heard them say, "Imagine a washerwoman driving a car so well the first time." Toad went a little faster. Then, a lot faster. He heard the men call out, "Be careful, washerwoman." But as soon as Toad was going full speed, the rush of the air in his face and the hum of the engine made him almost lose his mind with happiness. "Washerwoman, ha!" he shouted recklessly. "Ho ho, I'm Toad, the motor car snatcher, the prison breaker, Toad who always escapes. Now you'll know what driving really is, for you are in the hands of the famous, the skillful, the fearless Toad." "This is the Toad who stole our car," one of the men shouted. "Grab him. We'll take him back to the police station." They should have remembered to stop the motor car somehow before doing something like that. The car crashed through a hedge and into a muddy little pond. Toad picked himself up and ran off as fast as he could, scrambling through the hedges, jumping ditches, pounding across fields, till he was breathless and tired and had to slow down. When he got his breath back and started to think about what had happened, he began to giggle. Then he began to laugh. And he laughed till he had to sit down under a hedge. "Ho ho!" he cried. "Toad again, Toad as usual. Toad comes out on top. Clever Toad, great Toad, good Toad." Then he burst into song again until suddenly he saw two large policemen running toward him. Toad started running again. "Oh my," he gasped. "What an idiot I am, singing songs again." He looked back and saw the policemen were catching up to him. He ran and ran, but they kept getting closer. He was running so fast that he didn't see the river until he had fallen into it and was swept away. He bobbed along trying to grab the reeds along the bank, but the current was too strong. "Oh my," gasped poor Toad. "I'll never steal a motor car again. I'll never sing another boastful song." Finally, he saw a big dark hole in the bank just above his head, and he reached up with a paw and grabbed the edge and held on. Then a twinkle appeared from deep in the dark hole. As it came closer, Toad saw it was a face. A familiar face. A little brown face with whiskers, small neat ears, and thick, silky hair. It was Rat! We'll read chapter 10 next time. Till then, as Tigger says, ta-ta for now. Love you guys. Bye-bye.